and probably Stack Overflow will be one of the dream companies to work for any developer. I think this is going to be the biggest takeaway for them, and never stop learning. And even for myself, I think
take your courses online. LinkedIn has great courses that you can take, and always be learning. That's the key.
Hello, remote revolutionaries. I am Nirav Shah, co-founder of Ultra Genius. We are connecting awesome developers to some of the best remote companies and opportunities in the world. And welcome to our podcast, Borderless, in which we are going to talk a lot about remote tips, how you are able to get remote jobs, at the same time for companies, how to manage your remote teams, and a lot of exciting stuff about the remote work culture and the remote revolution that is happening in the world right now. And we're going to have some amazing guests. And today we are going to have Debbie Shotwell, who is Chief People Officer, and she also is the Chief Culture Officer at Stack Overflow, without which I don't think any of the developers would survive, right? Stack Overflow is a site where most of the developers, they almost live and breathe their entire time, right? So I'm super excited to have Debbie on our show. And thanks a lot, Debbie, for joining the show and the podcast. And I want to congratulate you and the Stack Overflow team for winning the best companies to work for in 2023. So many congratulations for that.
Thank you, Nirav. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Great. Thanks. So Debbie, there are a lot of people who look up to you. You have got some amazing experience working at various companies and even working with Stack Overflow as a chief people and culture officer, right? So I would love to know more about your story. What made you get into this field, and at the same time, your role at Stack Overflow. How does your day look like at Stack Overflow as well? So would love to know more about that.
Well, my day is very busy, as you can imagine, so I start very early. I was fortunate enough to realize at a very young age that I wanted to work in the people business. And so even before I went to college, I was fortunate and had opportunities to work in HR departments. I came home and I told my father, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to work in the HR business. And he said, why would you want to do that? That's personnel, it's administrative. And I said to him that you never know, someday organizations will say people are the most important asset.
Yep.
And he remembered that. And several years later, after I graduated, he said, oh my goodness, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about something that you said to me before you went to college, that people are the most important asset. So I realized at a very young age, I was very fortunate, and I have worked in HR my entire career, which a lot of people cannot say. They fall into the HR department. So I'm very, very lucky to be at Stack Overflow. Several years ago, I started at a very interesting time because it was in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
And Stack Overflow was making a lot of changes. They hired our CEO, Prashant, in 2019. And I joined in January of 2021. So I was lucky. He and I talked about the opportunity and what he wanted to accomplish at Stack Overflow. And he really wanted somebody to partner with. And when I say really partner with, he really wanted that. And he has been nothing but a great partner. And part of the reason why I can do what I do is because I have a great CEO and a fabulous leadership team. And of course, all our developers, they're amazing. They're wonderful to work with. So we have a fabulous team, and that's why we're a great place to work.
Yep. I completely agree, and I can relate that from all the amazing reviews that you have online, right, from your team as well as from various people talking about your culture. And so hats off to that. Now, means coming to, right from pandemic, right? So a lot of companies have gone remote, right? And they are struggling with the issues around productivity, right? And they're always concerned on, whether my team is working or not working, whether they are moonlighting or I don't know, and there is always this debate going on whether whether to give them flexibility or bring them back to office. So how do you tackle these challenges that Stack Overflow means? How do you go about ensuring that developers are very happy, at the same time they are very productive as well?
Well, it starts with leadership and trust. And one of the things organizations have to realize is that for 2 years, they had to work at home. They were, had no other choice.
Correct.
And as long as you're very clear about the goals and what you're trying to accomplish, and really making sure that people understand how they add value to the organization and what they can bring to the table, and their managers are setting their goals and having one-on-ones with them, and really watching and the priorities that every single organization has, then ultimately you put the trust into your employees to get the work done that they need to get done.
Correct.
And that's the way it works at Stack. Now, we had a bit of an advantage, and I will say that 60% of our employees were remote before the pandemic started. And so now we're at 98% remote, and we will be 100% remote by the end of the year.
Wow, that's amazing. That's and how big is your team? I was checking LinkedIn, and it's more than 800 employees.
We're about 650 employees.
650 employees. Wow. That's a pretty huge number, right? Because a lot of companies, even at 40, 50 employees, they are thinking about whether is remote possible, is remote something that can help us grow and thrive. And here is a great example of how Stack Overflow is remote and is going to continue to be remote, and that's amazing. Great. And coming to my next question, which related to culture and values, right? Because they are extremely important in an organization. So wanted your thoughts in terms of how do you imbibe the culture of Stack Overflow, and how do you imbibe the values that you want your team to have, right? Because when people are working in office, the culture and values are very easy to translate and to from one person to the other, right? But is there anything that you do specifically to ensure that the culture and values are maintained?
It's a really good question, because it is hard to do when you're not in an office. We try, when we bring our new stackers into the company, to spend a lot of time on the onboarding process. So we talk about values when they come in. We talk about the importance of our strategic priorities. Our CEO and myself and all of our executives actually are part of that onboarding process, and we emphasize it. Every single week, Prashant, our CEO, sends an email on Fridays. It's Friday, so he sent a great email this Friday. And we emphasize values in that email every single week.
Makes sense.
We also have monthly managers meetings. We have AMA Ask Me Anything meetings once a quarter for our employees. They can ask anything. We also have meetings where we're very transparent about our goals and our objectives. And as I indicated, every single employee has a development plan. Also, they have one-on-ones with their managers where we keep talking about the goals and how their job is important to the success of the company. So we're very fortunate that we have a very open way of doing this. And we have opportunities for employees to continue to ask questions and continue to make, requests for change. We also have an employee engagement survey that we do, and then we do an inclusion survey on a quarterly basis. And we have action plans for each department that each manager is responsible for making sure that we deliver the results on those action plans. So if there's an area where we need to improve, we listen to our employees. We get their advice, we get their suggestions, and then we take action. That's part of our deliverables.
Wow. I'm pretty amazed at what you're doing, and also doing that at a pretty big scale. And I think that's amazing in terms of how, some of the tips that you mentioned, because even at Ultra Genius, right, where we have a certain set of values that we are looking to imbibe in, means we are a startup right now, but There are some values that we have in mind where, you know, we were thinking about how to imbibe those values onto our team. And I think this weekly email is a great idea that you have in terms of focusing on some values. And at the same time, I think that's the entire process that you have explained, right from one-on-one meetings to also listening. And the most important thing that you mentioned is taking action on the feedback, because because that is very important, because once you listen to your employees and you act upon it, uh, then it also builds more of belonging of employees towards the company, and at the same time it reinforces the trust that is required for a long-term relationship. So that's amazing. Coming to so we have a lot of HRs and a lot of junior HRs or even senior HRs, right, who look up to you, and also even founders, CTOs who are looking to go remote, startups. Do you have any like tips for them if they are at a very young stage, or let's say at a mid-level company stage? Do you have any specific tips for them on how to go about going remote if they are currently not very sure? Any suggestions that you have for them?
I think that you really have to understand what your organizational's accountability is to your shareholders, to your employees, and what you're trying to accomplish. But if you are trying to make that decision, what I would say is that you need to really prepare and be really open with your employees, the expectations you have.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know flexibility is important. And so allowing your employees to get the work done in a timely way, and then at the same time being able to trust that they will do it, and when they are struggling, provide them the support.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Great. That's great, Debbie. I think, and means there are a lot of HRs in terms of the junior HRs or even senior HRs, right? And there are a lot of founders of startups and CTOs, CEOs who are building their remote right now. So do you have any tips for them on how they can go about building a great remote team with great culture and an amazing productivity? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I would say the most important thing is to be very clear on the goals that you're trying to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
and to trust that your people that you hire are going to deliver the results that you need, because you've outlined it very clearly, the priorities. But
Mm-hmm.
going remote does require that you put a great deal of faith and trust into your people.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires that your leadership is very clear on how you'll get work done together. For
Mm-hmm.
us at Stack Overflow, collaboration, teamwork, and living by our values is extremely important. And one of our values is learn, share, and grow. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of that is having to make modifications and changes to the way
Mm-hmm.
we work. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say the future of work, it's not going to change much from where it is today,
Mm-hmm.
because people are working remote. In fact, you've heard, I'm sure recently, the most current article is the bosses are back in charge. They're demanding that all the employees go back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everyone needs to make a decision that's best for their organization. We
Right.
just are doing the reverse. We are going 100% remote. We're 60% before pandemic, and now we're 98, and by the end of the year we'll be 100% remote.
Mm-hmm.
It's a change, but you have to have trust your employees will deliver what they say they can deliver, and you have to be able to measure productivity. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I think is important for small companies, large companies, is really being able to get great data. And so having access to data and being able to report data, and that has to do with productivity, analytics, particularly around your people, will be really important. Also, having the best tools that you can have for your employees to do their job.
Yep.
So, providing them the technology, the best computers, the best collaboration tools. For sales, everybody uses Salesforce. I'm not here to sell you Salesforce, but, making sure that people have the tools they need to do their job. So, that would be my tips on how to manage the remote world.
Awesome. I think there are a lot of golden nuggets out there. Each and every sentence in itself is, you can speak at length about what Debbie just, mentioned. I think some amazing tips out there. I'm learning a lot myself. So I hope the audience is enjoying this conversation as well. Now, coming to, there are a lot of people looking out for remote jobs, and probably Stack Overflow will be one of the dream companies to work for any developer as well. So what would be your tips for them to be able to prepare for working in a remote environment? Let's say if they want to work for a remote company, what things that they should, in terms of sharpening their skills, what should they do? How should they go about, cracking a remote interview? At the same time, any more tips that you have specific to Stack Overflow on what you look for in candidates when you hire them? So would love to know.
Great question. So I think this is for any company, not just Stack Overflow. Have enthusiasm. Really, really do your research on the company. And if you really want to work for the company, you need to sell yourself right now. There's lots of job openings, and there's probably more than enough people to apply for them. But you have to know the company, understand what the organization's expectations are, and understand where your skill set fits. One tip I always make sure that people do when they're applying for positions is always send that cover letter. Always define where your skills meet the job profile. Make sure that you outline that. And then when you have the interview, be very prepared to ask a lot of questions. I always tell everybody, have at least 10 questions that you want to have answers to. And they could be very basic questions, but make sure that you try to get those questions answered. Even if you can't do it in the interview, when you follow up, make sure you send a thank you note for an interview and ask more questions. Curiosity is what's going to get the job, and really being enthusiastic about wanting to work for a company and having a real good reason. And one of the things our people used to say to me when they'd come and interview, and it's probably the worst answer you could have, is, why do you want to work in our HR department? Well, they typically say, I like people. And that's the reason why I want to work in HR. So that isn't the right answer. So if you're going to work in HR, don't use that one. Really understand why you like to work with people and really give some detail around it. So that would be my tips. Make sure that you hone your skills. And I always say, there's so many online courses that you can take today. Continue to work on your skill development. Take your courses online. It has great courses that you can take, and always be learning. That's the key. I try to learn something new every month and do different things just because I want to grow.
Wow. That's amazing. Means that's so inspiring. Means, even, and especially hearing from you who has already achieved so much in your career, right? And you are still learning and growing. So there are a lot of developers on Ultra Genius Network who are looking for these amazing opportunities. So I think this is going to be the biggest takeaway for them, and never stop learning. And even for myself, I don't think at any point of time, we need to stop learning. Even maybe after we retire also, I think there is always something to learn to be able to grow, not for the world, but for yourself, right? And to grow in your own eyes. I think that's very important. Wow, that's amazing. Great. And Ravi, in terms of how you think in terms of future of work, right? Some means a lot of controversies are going on in terms of some companies are asking their employees to come back 3 days a week. Some companies are asking their employees to come back completely to the office. Some and there are some bosses who are asking their employees to work 80-hour weeks, right? And there's a lot of buzz going on around that. But what, according to you, means is going to be the future of work, and according to you, which company is going to succeed in terms of attracting the best talent?
So I have a really strong opinion about this, and probably it differs from many people. I think that the way work should be is you should be able to work anywhere you need to work as long as you get your work done. Have very specific goals and objectives. And this is in technology companies. Obviously, nurses and policemen and firemen have to work in the workplace. We're supporting our communities, which is fabulous. But in a technology type of environment, I think people should be able to work where they can, and as long as they get their work done and they're very clear on their goals and objectives. But the key to success will be making sure that you have opportunities and moments for teams, groups, and overall companies to get together so they can spend time together, collaborate, learn, and share with one another. Those moments are going to be critical. So making sure that you have a quarterly cadence or a biannual cadence or an annual cadence where employees have that opportunity to connect and get together. And I like to say break bread together and enjoy each other's company. A lot of companies have moved to this type of environment where they get together once a year and they keep their teams connected that way. Stack Overflow does that once a year, always in April. Since I've been here, we get together and we bring everybody to one location and we talk about what our priorities are for the year, what our big strategic plans are for the future. We also have lots of learning opportunities. We have a volunteer opportunity. And really, really, if you want a great culture, you have to be open to listening to your employees. I talked about that earlier. So we always talk about engagement in our company, and we're always measuring it and we're acting on it. So it's something that you continuously need to do to create an environment where remote works. And if you want to work for a remote company, I think you have to be prepared to be very flexible. That flexibility sometimes means if you're working for a global company, that you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, one day a week in order to get on a hangout or a meeting so you can get things done with your team. So you have to be flexible. Obviously, it can be an advantage because you don't have to drive into the office. So there is some benefits there for people, particularly in those populated areas in New York and California, where it takes quite a bit of time to get to the office because of commute time. So, but be flexible, and organizations are going to still see employees say, I am not coming back to the office 5 days a week. That's the future. And more people will say, I'd like to work from home 5 days a week. The question is, how open will they be to making those changes?
Yep. Oh, I think this is amazing, and I completely agree to you because there's sometimes there are just some changes are irreversible, right? And once the talent has understood that, okay, they can be really productive, they can contribute a lot. At the same time, they can spend some quality time with their family instead of just getting stuck in traffic, right? It doesn't make sense to a lot of smart people out there. They realize that, okay, this is what the value of my time is, and this is what I want to do in my life. They think that, okay, I want to do amazing work. At the same time, I don't want to waste my time on things which are not necessary. And I completely agree to each and everything that you suggested here. And definitely means, especially the founders who are starting off right now, right? And so this is one of the best opportunities where larger companies are inviting their talent to come back to office. It is the best time to get them on board on your startup and work with them, right? And grow. And some of the best startups have grown from getting some of the best talent in periods of recession, right? So, and I think there's an amazing opportunity for both startups as well as companies who are going remote to get some of the best talent on their side. And we have always seen that in the end, the company that has the best team, it wins, right? The best people, it wins. So that is something which is very important. And I think this is, great advice. In terms of, coming to the next section, right? It is going to be a small rapid fire round where it's like a little fun round where I'll give you two options. You have to pick any one out of two. Okay. And at the same time, it's going to be a little fun for our audience, and at the same time, and you, Debbie, you have to be very instantaneous about the reply. So whatever the first thing comes to your mind, just give it a go. So here goes my first question for that. Whenever you look for hiring an employee, you have to pick one of the two things: skills or attitude. What would it be? Awesome. Great. Now, when you're working for a company, right, or when you are setting your culture, what would you like your employees to be thinking of? Hard work or smart work? Okay, that's great. In terms of candidates who are applying for Stack Overflow or any other remote workplace, what according to you is more important, technical skills or communication skills?
Skills.
Okay, yeah, that was a tough one actually, because I know that both are equally important, but I wanted your opinion on that, on what you would
That
value.
was a hard one to answer. So you
Yep,
told me I had to rapidly answer. So
yep. I know. Great. And coming to means the last rapid fire question in terms of what would you value more in terms of people or profits?
people.
Yep. I think that is one of the very important messages that a lot of companies right now they should be understanding, and people are watching, and sooner or later they will realize the mistakes that they are happening, they are making right now in the market. But yeah, I think this is amazing because even I'm of the same opinion where people are always, there are some companies who, in spite of getting not so great financial results, they're still standing by the people. And there are some companies on the other hand we are seeing where they have humongous profits and still laying off thousands and thousands of employees instead of reskilling them, right? So that's something which is something that I'm not able to wrap my head around. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I think valuing people over profits is extremely important. Great. I think in terms of coming to audience, right? I would love to know, how did you find this conversation with Debbie? What are the questions that you think that I should have asked, but I didn't ask? This is not something that, is my primary forte. I'm an engineer myself. I went to Columbia University, did computer science, was in New York, like Debbie mentioned, and traffic. But But yeah, so are there any questions that you think I should have asked? Is there anything else that you would like to know more about remote work, culture, tips? Please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and also share this video. I think it's amazing, amazing content. You don't get to interact with, people like, a given day, right? On a normal day. This is some of the best advice that I have myself gotten by spending this 30 to 45 minutes with Debbie myself. And I am sure a lot of HRs, a lot of founders, a lot of people who are working at companies and looking to go remote or either looking for remote work, they are going to have amazing value out of this. I am really grateful that we chose to and accepted this invite as a guest on being on this podcast. I really, really appreciate that. And thanks a lot, Debbie, for all the advice and tips that you have given, both for companies and for candidates who are looking to go remote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nirav, for having me. It was a pleasure, and it was so nice meeting you. And I wish your listeners the best of luck. And feel free to apply for a job at Stack Overflow. We'd love to hear from your listeners.
Absolutely means, yeah. And if I personally feel that Stack Overflow, if you go through their Glassdoor ratings, and even I've, some of my friends, means they have worked at Stack Overflow, they are stackers themselves, and all I've heard is just amazing reviews out of, so if you are looking for a dream remote company to work for, Stack Overflow should be one of the first options that you should apply for. And listen to all the tips that we mentioned in this podcast and ensure you follow them, right? And all the best for your application. And I hope you get a job at a company like Stack Overflow. And for all the HRs out there, there is a lot to be learned from Debbie and Stack Overflow team and how they have built their culture over time and how they are growing at the same time. What I really learned from this particular episode is the key is that trust and setting priorities, right? And communication and weekly one-on-ones, right? And taking employee feedback and acting upon them are the most important things that you can have. And that is what which will make your company win. And this is what I've learned, and these are my takeaways. Would love to know about what were the best takeaways that you guys found in this podcast. And we'll be having our next episode soon. Please let us know your feedback in the comments. We will be very happy to listen and improve on that. Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Debbie.